Yeah, boy, it's June 10th, and it's episode 76, and this is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your host, Uncle Buckets. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasyfootballauctioneer, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight we're going to take a look at the NFC, and we're going to break down the major free agent moves. But of course, our experts, they're always here. He's researching the hand of God and the 4-5-1 formation for the upcoming World Cup soccer pools. Slim, how's it going tonight? I don't know if you're actually doing that, but I just sent out the invite, so...
Did you? I don't even notice
it. I sent it to Blister to send it out to all pool members, and he knows all the pool members. So,
gotcha.
Anyways.
Yeah, no, I have no idea about soccer. I couldn't tell you. I could guess maybe a bunch of teams that are in it, but I couldn't tell you more than 10 with certainty. But I'll probably do a little research right before. Hey, I think I got second in it the one time.
Yeah, you probably did.
One of my African teams, I took like Ghana or something as a dark horse, and they actually lived up to some hype. And yeah, I think I got second, maybe behind you or Z or something like that.
It wasn't me. It was St. Croix, I think, won that thing. Shout out to G Money. Speaking of G, I saw Little G. He's floated me $10. Already entered the pool. First paid.
What?
Yeah. Saw him at Safeway, and I said, hey, I'm going to start and do a pool tonight. He says, hey, here's $10. I'm like, all right, away we go. Anyways.
Who did that?
Little G, Joe Dirt.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was still alive.
Well, I was surprised to see him. Anyways, we've already heard his voice. So the intro is he's slowly counting to 200, which is the total number of points of our fantasy football or fantasy hockey playoff pool. We're just about to crack the 200 mark. Blister. We are the champions.
It's sweet, isn't it? I mean, we've never been in this spot before. We've worked hard at this hockey pool. We've ran it for I don't know how many years now. It's been going since 1982, and this will be the first time. Now, of course, we haven't been in it since that long, but
no. I was only 6 years old.
We've been in it for at least 14 years probably, and this will be our first title. But we're doing it in grand fashion, and previous pool record was 165 points for the playoff pool, and we are sitting at 196 right now. So we're making history and making very few dollars at it, but we're making history at least, and we get our name on the trophy, and I'm sure we'll make a big deal of that.
I'm sure we will, because I am kind of a big deal. Anyways,
right.
So there's the intros, guys. Let's get this rolling. We're already running late. I mentioned Safeway in the intro, so I know we're running late if I do that. Anyways, if you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. So. Last time we were on the air, we discussed the AFC free agency, and in case you missed it, head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballauction.com/podcast. Look for episode 75, where we broke down all the AFC. Tonight, it's the NFC's turn. We're breaking down the NFC free agents and all of the fantasy football implication of those moves. We've been off the air for the last few weeks because we've been working a little bit too hard on the draft kit, so we'll just... break into a little ad on the draft kit. This segment of the Fantasy Football Auctioneer is brought to you by our second annual Fantasy Football Auction draft kit. June 1st, we released our 2014 edition of the draft kit. This year, we went crazy. We're multimedia. We have embedded videos. We have downloadable spreadsheets, more downloadable content. You can get right to the podcast, all the fun stuff. This kit is 100% dedicated to auctions. This kit, it will be updated all summer long for free, and the updates will be delivered to your inbox. Did I mention free? This kit is less than an outdated magazine. It's only $6.95. Right now, it's over 90 pages of all auction content. Last year, we got up over 135. So head on over to the website, thefantasyfootballauction.com, and click on the Draft Kit button. We've got a free sample, a little download there. You can check out and see what the Draft Kit's all about. That's thefantasyfootballauction.com/draft kit. There we go. Haven't done a commercial in a while, guys. So
That's good.
we don't have any Twitter questions or anything, do we, Slim?
No, I don't think so.
All right, then let's get rolling. Blister, we're going to start with you. We're just going to we're going through the NFC. Blister, we're starting with you. The Chicago Bears. We're just looking at free agent moves right now. They've made an addition to their wide receiver roster from Washington. Josh Morgan's been added to the roster. Any real fantasy implications there, Blister, or anything else you're excited about when it comes about the Bears?
Well, the Bears got some good fantasy players, but I don't think Josh Morgan's going to be one of them. Obviously, with Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, that's what I always say. Anyways, those two guys are going to be studs, obviously. And Matt Forte, last year he was the number 2 running back in PPR. I can't imagine him taking any steps back. So there's 3 guys right there you want to target in all your auctions this year, and expect to pay some top dollars for them. I can't imagine any of those 3 guys going for less than 45. Somewhere probably closer to $50. But you know what? They're probably well worth it as well. But I don't think Josh Morgan is going to be a guy that you have to really target at any point. Actually, Marquez Wilson, I might have said that wrong, Goose. You can correct me on that. But Marquez Wilson, he was a rookie last year. Depending on what site you look at, he could be 6'3", he could be 6'4". We'll say he's 6'3.5". But he trained with Jeffrey and Marshall all summer, or in the off season, anyways. Here, and he put on some weight, and he looks to be the guy that's going to take the number 3 slot for Earl Bennett, who departed. So he could be a guy that to get some looks. Last year he only had 2 catches, but I think this year you could see an uptick there. And with Brandon Marshall being a free agent and not getting any younger, if Wilson, this young Wilson they drafted last year, can continue to develop, you never know. Maybe they won't be too eager to re-sign Marshall at the end of the year. So if you're in a dynasty league, you really want to pay attention to this Wilson and see how he develops over the rest of the summer and what his role is as the season progresses. But Bennett is still there at tight end, and I've never been real excited about him. But I mean, he's a guy to take a real late flyer on in your auction. I mean, for $1 you'll get him, and with that offense that Trestman runs, I mean, he could have plenty of opportunities. So he's not a bad guy to pick up late in an auction. And at least use him as a streaming tight end. You might be able to grab a couple guys for $1 or $3, depending on how deep your bench is, and then play them accordingly or play the waiver wire accordingly. So, no, nothing too exciting about Morgan. Keep a closer eye on Wilson, the rookie from last year. He's coming into his second year. But like we said before, we won't talk badly about Cutler, but I mean, he's another guy too that I wouldn't spend too much money on. You should be able to get him for $2-3 at the most in an auction, probably maybe even $1. But he's a guy that you could stream in from time to time. I think I've talked enough about Bears, but one other thing, Cutler likes Marshall. He'll look for Marshall a little bit more. Marshall had 15 more targets last year than Jeffrey, and Cutler was out for a period of time. I think Jeffrey's numbers took a bit of a jump when McCollum was throwing the ball, but I think you can't go wrong having either of those 2 receivers on your team this year.
All right, so no to Josh Morgan, but yes to the trio and whomever else over there. Slim, let's move on to you. Let's take a look at the Detroit Lions. They added in free agency this year the wide receiver from Seattle, Golden Tate. We've talked about him a little bit before, but that was a few weeks ago. So remind everybody what you think about Golden Tate at Detroit.
Well, I like him quite a bit this year, actually. I think with the addition of Ebron and with Pettigrew, I think they will help take some of the focus towards the middle of the field, as well as obviously what Calvin Johnson does on the opposite side of the field. And I think Tate, for himself, he's got to be happy. He's in a pass-first offense now, something he's never had playing in Seattle. Right now, he's being taken kind of as a mid-tier-ish wide receiver 3, which I think provides some value in drafts. The latest mock update I did, he goes for around roughly $14. Along the likes of, Sammy Watkins goes for $1 less than him. And if I had to pick between the two, I'm taking Golden Tate all day. just because of the volume, I think, that's going there. So right now, I think he's a value in auction drafts, and a lot of them. Who knows if that'll hold up as the summer progresses, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see him climb into kind of the low-end wide receiver 2 range, but which is more, I think, where he fits in. But I think right now, if you can get him as a wide receiver 3, you're looking maybe at some potential big-time value there. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets close to 1,000 yards receiving.
Yeah, not bad out of your wide receiver 3, no kidding.
Not
So
at
something
all.
to pay attention to. I know in the draft kit, Slim and Blister put a lot of time and effort into those tiering and taking a look at where guys slot in. So right now, Slim, from what you saw in your mock, who's he kind of grouped with? You said Sammy Watkins. You remember anybody else that was kind of in that ballpark?
Well, I mean, in the mock I did, it was a 10-team mock, so it was a little bit skewed. There was lots of cheap receivers later on in the draft, but just as far as kind of where he's gone in other mocks and stuff like that, it's Emmanuel Sanders is a guy typically taken around him. Maybe Kendall Wright, things like that. Marcus Colston, and for me, other than Emmanuel Sanders, I think Tate is the next best option in a group like that. You might see Reggie Wayne tossed in there, but for me, Tate has the most upside out of any of those guys. Like I said, other than maybe Emmanuel Sanders. Like I said, I think he's value right now.
So one of those guys maybe you could sneak in at the front end of your auction if you were doing one right away here and maybe get him because people aren't overly high on him. Just trying to think of auction strategy on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go at the beginning, but I think maybe once the, say, top 8 receivers are gone, it's maybe someone you sneak in there, especially if there's guys, that you're looking to avoid. Like I know for me, I'm maybe not quite so high on, say, Andre Johnson or Percy Harvin or something like that. So if those guys are still on the board, maybe I'll throw Tate in ahead of those guys and see if I can sneak them in, hoping that other people will see, higher ranked receivers and say, okay, I'm going to save my $10 here because I want to make a play for Michael Crabtree or Roddy White or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, you can always try and mix it in there, and that's what mocks are for, and you can see maybe what works and kind of what the general consensus is of the public on a guy like Tate.
All right. Good stuff. Let's move on. Blister, stay with the NFC North division. Let's take a look at the Green Bay Packers. As far as additions go for fantasy football implications, nothing really too significant as far as additions. I guess you can kind of take a look at losses, Blister, at James Jones and Jermichael Finley heading out of the frozen tundra. So that's definitely going to be a frozen impact, brother. A fantasy impact on Green Bay. Anything else you want to mention there with the Pack?
I'm not too worried about the losses of Jones or Finley. Finley's been banged up and hasn't really ever worked out to be the guy we all wanted him to be probably for the last 3 or 4 years. He always kind of disappointed. So the big question, I guess, at tight end who will replace him. Like if you go on a mock right now and Andrew Corliss is on the board, he won't even get drafted in most cases. So you got to think there's got to be a tight end there that's going to get some action. Maybe it's not going to be him. I know I've seen guys even draft, this Richard Rodgers is getting the look, and Colt Lyerla. He's way down the depth chart, but somebody has to develop at tight end there, and I think we're lucky in that regard to have the rest of the summer. Now, if you have an inside, I would have to think Corliss has the inside track. I've been there, being familiar with the offense and everything like that. And if you want to take a late round flyer on him in your auction, go for it. If the worst case scenario, just dump him down the road. But it's not a bad stab when you're in that high-powered offense with Aaron Rodgers throwing you the ball. The interesting part at wide receiver is that Nelson, Cobb, and Boykin both aren't signed for 2015. So all 3 of them, I think they can get Jarrett probably re-signed fairly cheap if they want to. But the big question mark is, both Cobb or Nelson are playing for a new, bigger contract, hopefully for the following year. Will it be in Green Bay or will it be somewhere else? They probably could sign one of them, but chances are they won't sign too, especially with this Devontae Adams that they drafted, the rookie. He's a guy that could sneak up the depth chart too, and again, someone you want to keep an eye on. So not so much the free agents; they didn't really add anybody, but it'll be interesting. And those are things to keep in mind when you're drafting and auctioning. If you have a guy in a tier, say Jordy Nelson, and you have him in, I had him in a group with who did I have with him? Like Vincent Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Crabtree, White, Welker, Victor Cruz. I might have had him grouped in that tier. But to me, if I'm in a little bit of a bidding war and I'm looking at the guys in the tier, I might pay the extra dollar or two on a guy like Jordy Nelson, knowing that he could potentially be putting up a good season, knowing he's playing for a contract for the following year. And a guy like Jordy, like we look back in 2011, he was a 4th-ranked wide receiver in PPR. 2012, he dropped it off a bit. He had some injury trouble, was 38th. And last year, he moved all the way up to 13th, and that was without playing with Aaron Rodgers most of the time. So I really think Jordy Nelson could be a bit of somewhat of a sleeper. Like, people know of him, but he hasn't been, he's not Demaryius Thomas, he's not Des Bryant, but he's a guy that could potentially wind up in the top 5, top 6 wide receivers at the end of the year, especially in PPR with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. So those are guys, you really want to look at. And the backfield, Eddie Lacy, we like him. We got him on one or two of our fantasy teams right now. Yeah. He finished 8th last year in PPR as a rookie. I expect big things out of him again this year. I just hope he can stay healthy and be on the field for all 16 games. So, if you're taking Eddie Lacy right now, James Starks could have walked. They could have let him go, but they re-signed him, so they must see something in him still. So he's right now on the depth chart number 2. So keep him in the back of your mind as well, because if you're putting guys on your bench after, and if you're a Lacy owner, he's a great handcuff. So
remember how excited? Sorry, I was just remember how excited we were about Jonathan Franklin. And who was
he's not gone. I mean, he's in there still, but I guess it just depends if he gets the opportunity to play. There's a lot of guys in there right now. DeJuan Harris is in there too, so I think and they seem to be excited about him last year too, coming off the injury. So we'll see. I know Lacy will get the nod, and after that it'll be a battle to see who remains with the guys with the pack after that.
All right, so Slim, let's move on to you. Speaking of battles, it's going to be a battle for something important to talk about here. Take a look at the Minnesota Vikings. As far as free agency moves in and out, as you put in the draft kit, none of significance for either additions or losses. So anything you want to talk about with the Vikes?
Well, I mean, there's nothing as far as real differences on the team, but believe it or not, I'm a little bit intrigued by what Greg Jennings can offer. I think this year, as opposed to last year, you're going to see him in drafts come up for, $1 to $3, somewhere in that range. And I think for a price like that, I think he could very well lead this team in receiving, which isn't saying a ton, because I don't think that you're not going to have a 1,000-yard receiver. Well, yeah, but I mean, if I'm going to get a guy for $1 as my wide receiver 4 or 5, and he, produces 700 yards and maybe 7 touchdowns, that's, to me, that's value. Is it as good a season as we're used to seeing out of Green Bay? No, of course not. I mean, quarterback play just isn't there. But and you look at Cordarrelle Patterson. I mean, I had him on a couple fantasy teams last year, and I waited a long time, and finally at the end of the year, he started finding the end zone, but to me, he's the ultimate boomer bust guy. And if you look at the plays where he scored in his big games last year, it was because he was taking an 80-yard rush to the house or something like that. I mean, I just find plays like that, it's hard to duplicate those. So I look at it and I think, is he capable of doing those same things again next year? And I think no. And I don't think the quarterback situation's necessarily improved a ton. So I'm not quite sure how much contribution we're going to see from Patterson, unless he breaks those big plays on his own. He's going to do that a few times, but I don't think we can come to expect it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see just a slightly better season than what he had last year. Just because he's probably going to, make a few more of those plays than he totaled last year. But week in and week out, I think you're going to be in for a roller coaster ride with somebody like Cordarrelle Patterson, whereas Jennings, as unflashy as it may be, could be the more consistent option weekly. So it's something to keep an eye on, and definitely if Jennings is there late in the draft. I think take him as a wide receiver 4 or 5, and I think right now with Patterson, he's being drafted. I'm trying to at $20 right now. To me, that's too high for him. I would much rather have Jeremy Maclin or T.Y. Hilton or even Michael Floyd than Cordell Patterson at that price.
Right. Well, on Patterson, I mean, in a draft and go type scenario, great, because you could boom, you say, for 3 or 4 weeks, and he's going to score some good points. But we talked about it last year quite a bit coming into our auction drafts, that idea of week-to-week consistencies and not just looking at season-ending totals, saying 700 yards, but you get that in 4 weeks, right? So paying attention to some of that about where you're going to spend your money. And remember, you got to win each week in order to win this season. You don't just get to win this season because you have a lot of yards on your wide receivers, for instance. So it's week-to-week stuff. So important stuff to pay attention to, and figuring out where you're going to spend your money for sure.
Well, and if you look at last year, Greg Jennings finished as a top wide receiver weekly 3 times out of the 15 games he played. So where's Patterson here? I just want to look. I don't think Patterson was much better than that. I think he did it 4 or 5 times. So, I mean, Patterson gets a lot of Patterson did it 5 times in 16 games. He was a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. So percentage-wise, they're not that far apart on how they finish week in and week out as far as a top, as a starting caliber wide receiver for you week in and week out. But Cordell Patterson is going to go for much more money, and he's got way more hype about him. So again, that's a value that maybe you can take advantage of in draft day.
Right. Okay. So we did have something to talk about in Minnesota. We'll stick with not much to talk about, Blister. Taking a look at my Dallas Cowboys. Please tell me something interesting as far as fantasy implications, because we haven't added much in the way of free agents, and we did lose Miles Austin, which, I mean, fantasy implications might not be a whole bunch there, but talk about their free agent moves or lack thereof.
You lost the injury-prone Miles Austin, who's already banged up at Cleveland, so it's too bad, because if Josh Gordon's not there in Cleveland, obviously maybe he could have done something if he stayed healthy. But anyways, we're talking about the Cowboys right now. Yeah, they didn't do a lot free agent-wise, and they really didn't do a hell of a lot drafting as far as people that are rookies potentially that are going to get an opportunity to help your fantasy team. There's not much there. I guess after Big Dez, the biggest name out there that probably is going to get more hype this year, might be a little overvalued right now, but Terrence Williams. He had 44 grabs last year for 736 yards and 5 TDs. Now this year he's going to get the opportunity to be the number 2, and we always like that when you look at a guy who's opposite a true stud receiver, that the opportunity that it's going to come to him, because Dez will be getting double coverage and stuff. So Terrence, if he can continue to develop like everyone hopes he will, could be a really nice addition to your fantasy team this year. But after that, it's the same old faces. You got Dez, Witten. He isn't getting any younger, but he had a pretty good season last year. He ended up top 5, I believe, tight end. And he's a guy that it doesn't even matter if it's a dynasty or if it's your regular auction. Just because he's getting up there, I think, in age, he's not a guy that pulls down a lot of money. And I've seen him in dynasties go for $1 or $2 only. And if you're in just a normal redraft, he's not a bad guy to take a shot at. If you want a guy who, when you look at this offense, they didn't do a lot of changing. So why would he see any less targets than he did last year? And last year he got in the end zone more so than he did the year before. And if he can put up those type of numbers again, he's going to help you. And he's not a guy that is going to get double-digit fantasy points every week. I know that because I had him, but he's solid. DeMarco Murray in the backfield, again, he had a pretty good year last year. But he's a guy that if you're going into an auction, you're going to probably have a chance to pick up maybe a little bit cheaper than even for what he finished, because he's always got that cloud of injury over his head. And then the guys behind him, wow, it's tough. Lance Dunbar, Joseph Randall was a rookie last year, really didn't develop like they hoped. We'll see what happens. But if you take the biggest names out that they have, Dez and probably Witten and then DeMarco, then they don't seem to have a lot of depth, or at least not a lot of proven depth, which is kind of scary because injuries can and will happen. Tony Romo's coming off back surgery, but all indications are he should be good to go. He's a quarterback again that you can pick up in your auction for probably $1 or $2 this year, and he'll easily be a top 12, probably a top 10 quarterback for you. And he's another value play that you can have. So there's some value there. Nothing new as far as faces. Probably the newest name, though, I guess in fantasy that could be relevant this year in the Cowboys uniform is Terrence Williams.
All right. Well, nothing too exciting to.
You're a fan. You're a big fan, Bex. Are you? Yeah. How do you feel as a Cowboy?
I don't know. As far as fantasy stuff goes, we've talked about him in the past. I don't mind Tony Romo. You can usually get him for some good value, and week in, week out, you should get some pretty good production out of him. I don't know. I don't know if you're going to end up overpaying for DeMarco or for Dez. Last year, I kind of targeted for some of those high-end elite receivers, so he would be somebody if I'm going to stay with that same format to try to look for. But I think right now the guy where I see value is Romo. He typically gets poo-pooed on in a draft, but if you look at him year in, year out, he's a top 10 quarterback, and if you can get him for just a couple of bucks, I think that's good value so that you can use that money somewhere else. So I don't know. As a Cowboys fan, you don't get overly excited at this point in the season because, well, they're nothing but lose players. So, let's not even talk about the DST. We'll keep that under wraps. Yeah. Gross. Anyways, speaking of gross, Slim, let's talk about the G-men. The New York Giants, they picked up Rashad Jennings from Oakland and Mr. Manningham from your 49ers. Slim, talk to us about those additions, if they mean next to anything.
Well, I think Jennings obviously can, he's an intriguing option, and I think he's one of these guys you either love him or you hate him going into your draft, and in the sense that you think he's going to keep the starting job and do something with it, or you don't think he's going to, or you're scared of the situation. I honestly don't know what to make of it yet. I like him for this in the sense that he's a low mileage guy who's been in the league for a few years. Kind of reminds me of Fred Jackson, a guy that had been in the league for a while but never had tons of carries. So he's a little bit older, but he's still relatively fresh in terms of how many carries he's actually had in the NFL and the wear and tear on his body. So I think that he's kind of a Tom Coughlin guy in the sense too. Like he's fairly reliable with the ball. He's not going to make tons of mistakes. He's not going to do anything really flashy either, but I think he's a safe bet. And it's hard to say with David Wilson until we know what's going to happen with him when he comes back or if he comes back. Kind of how the timeshare might shake down, but I think right now, Jennings is in line for 20 touches a game, and obviously if David Wilson comes back, he's going to cut into that, and at some point, I think the way I envision it, it's Jennings' job to lose. If he gets injured and David Wilson comes in, then I think Jennings might have a tough time getting his job back. At least until David Wilson fumbles and then he's in the doghouse again, and
right.
and Jennings, is back in the field starting again. So if I had to pick between the two, I'm going to take Jennings and I'm going to roll the dice there because I think that it's only a matter of time before either Wilson gets hurt or probably more likely is he makes a mistake where Coughlin penalizes him for 3 or 4 games for it, which is stupid because he doesn't do it to anybody else. I don't know why he does it to David Wilson so much, but because yes, I want Peyton Hillis out there instead. That's such a much better option. But
yeah.
Anyway, so if it's me right now, I'm going to roll with Jennings. I think right now he's being taken kind of as a high-end RB3, which I think is a good spot for him right now. I think that's it's not crazy value or anything, but until we know more about what David Wilson's going to do, I think that's a good spot for him to be right now.
All right. Anything with Manningham? Any comment there? No? All right, good.
I mean, I can't envision much happening there. No.
All right. So with Akeem Nick's gone, that doesn't make him?
Well, I think Ruben Randall will step in, and hopefully he's learned to run some routes. I know they've changed the offensive philosophy a little bit with less or no option routes, which is what killed Eli a little bit last year because Ruben Randall didn't know how to run a route, and they were letting him choose the option to run, and he was running the wrong option most of the time, which led to some pretty bad-looking picks for Eli. So I think they've scrapped that a little bit. Hopefully he's learned a little bit more, Randall, and they drafted Odell Beckham, and I don't think you can expect tons from Beckham, but I think he will probably see a little more playing time than Manningham will. So I right now Manningham to me is undraftable right now.
Okay.
Except for in the deepest of leagues, maybe.
The deepest. All right, Blister, let's move to the Philadelphia Eagles. They added Darren Sproles this year, which could affect Shady McCoy a little bit, and could be interesting for a guy like Nick Foles. So, what do you think about Darren Sproles this year in Philly?
Well, Sproles is 31 now, and his numbers went down quite a bit last year. However, I do see him having a bit of a bounce-back year this year. I don't think he's going to really affect Shady unless they want to give Shady a rest here and there. But I think what they can do is continue to run this up-tempo offense and just throw Sproles out there and not miss a beat, really. He's probably going to be predominantly a third down back, catching balls out of the backfield. I don't see him getting a lot of carries, but last year, even though he had a terrible year, really, compared to some of his 2 years prior, he's still ranked 23rd in PPR for a running back. So I mean, he's still RB2,
no kidding, eh? RB2.
low-end RB2, and that wasn't a very good year. I just think the way this offense runs, and the loss of Deshaun Jackson and relatively, Macklin, he was banged up last year. We didn't get to see him at all. Cooper, he had some good games, but he only had 40-some catches. I could see Darren getting a lot more catches out of the backfield and his numbers being, better. And like I said, I do think he'll bounce back a bit. I don't think he's a long-term answer. If McCoy went down, I think Chris Polk would be the guy that would assume the number one, and Sproles would continue to be like the third down back. So I do like him this year. I think you'll get him cheaper, and I think he could contribute for you and be a nice flex guy because just because of the offense and the situation he's in. But other than that, they did lose Deshaun Jackson. Last year he was the 12th ranked. He had the best year of his career last year. He was a 12th ranked receiver. He had 82 grabs and 9 TDs. So there's 82 catches right there and 9 TDs that got to be dispersed among what they have left out there. And Macklin and Cooper, they are what they are. They're not your elite talent. They could be put in a good situation. I would not be jumping to get Cooper in my auction, but Macklin is a guy that if he can stay healthy and be a true number one, and Nick Foles can move that offense and he can throw the ball. So, I mean, he's a guy worth grabbing, but I don't think you're going to have to pay, Demaryius Thomas like money. Obviously, you're going to be able to probably get him. You might get him for $18 to 20 something, and he might. He could fill in quite nicely in your team. You might be lucky if you're going after receivers. He might be able to be your wide receiver 2 or maybe hopefully your 3, and that would be a pretty good option. But you got to keep an eye on Jordan Matthews and Huff, the rookies, Josh Huff, and I think Matthews has a better chance to be an impact this year. I know I don't chase after rookies in auctions, especially rookies in an auction, because I want to see them play and prove themselves first. And then we got a lot of examples of rookies that haven't done as well as all the hype, and I do think there's other rookies out there that are in better positions to make an impact this year. But these guys going forward are going to be more valuable, especially in the dynasty draft. Huff played with Kelly in Oregon, so he's very familiar with this offense as well. So I think Matthews is going to get all the attention right now, but watch for Huff to develop. Maybe he could potentially develop quicker. But these are guys that you would rather you probably shouldn't be maybe drafting them or taking them maybe late in your auction for $1 or $2. Don't pay any more than that. Don't expect huge things out of them. But by next year, they could be really, really helping your team. Tight end as well. Zach Ertz came in last year, a lot of hype. As we know, rookie tight ends don't do a whole lot, but I expect him to make a big leap this year. And he's a guy, again, that doesn't have the numbers from last year that is going to govern him to be gathering a lot of money in an auction right now. However, you can sit on him and pick him up late and cheap, and you potentially could have a real solid number one tight end there for you, a top 10 guy this year, maybe better. So you can keep an eye on that for late in your auction.
So I got him for $1 in the last mock I just did.
You did, eh? Yeah. I think he should have he could be a real nice surprise because he's not really getting a ton of thought and attention. There's so many other names there, but if Djax is gone, again, tight ends are a nice safety valve for the
second-year tight ends.
Yeah,
this is when they break out. The elite guys, this is when they break out. This is in the second year, typically.
This would be his opportunity for sure.
Yep,
there you go.
I agree.
I was just going to say, I was looking up Riley Cooper as you were speaking to him because he was kind of an anomaly. I mean, finishes, according to the fantasy data that I'm looking at, finishes as number 22 in standard scoring, but the second fewest targets out of the top 24 in the league, significantly below everybody except for Marvin Jones.
Pretty sad, really.
Yeah, and only 47 receptions, which is by far the fewest receptions out of anybody in that top 24. But yet the average per catch, the yards per catch, is 17.7 yards, and the only one to outscore him there is Megatron. So I don't know if that's somebody you really want to count on week in, week out, who is only, he had less than 50 receptions, less than 10 touchdowns, less than, he had 833 yards overall. So you got to count on that big play, the big play, the big play. And I don't know if that's something week in, week out that you want to spend big bucks for.
It's pretty tough, yeah.
So, I mean, even wide receiver $2,
no.
That stat line doesn't show wide receiver 2 except for, it's those 8 touchdowns that really helped him out. Outside of that, if you had 5 touchdowns or whatever, I mean, all of a sudden he's barely a flex play or whatever,
Well, Terrence Williams would have outscored him. That's the only reason he was that far ahead of Terrence Williams was the 3 extra touchdowns, I believe. Because basically Terrence wasn't always the number 2 last year. He was battling, and his numbers, like we talked about, were right around that same, around the same spot.
There you go. So if I look right now, Terrence Williams had 5 less targets. Had 9 less targets, had 3 less receptions, and 4 less touchdowns. So if he scores around that 5 point, but Terrence Williams finishes as number 40 overall.
Yeah.
So it's a big jump. So, I mean, 8 touchdowns isn't a lot. You're not like, whoa, he got 8 touchdowns. Like,
I think
Eddie Royal got 8 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jericho Cottrey had 10 touchdowns. So, I mean, I don't know. So put that into your anyways, but Blister, I was going to ask you, Darren Sproles, you're talking about, he could be a good pickup, but do you think you're going to get him for flex dollars? Like, or are you going to have to spend RB2 stuff because he's a big name in a big system?
Well, it all depends. I think how knowledgeable your league is, I guess, because guys that I think of some guys in our one league that'll be just thinking of Darren Sproles.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Realize that he kind of fell off the pace last year that he was putting up prior to that. It'll be interesting. I can't remember. I was in a couple auctions now, and I just can't remember what he went for. But the hope would be that I wouldn't be paying big dollars for him just because he's getting up there in age, 31, and everything new, this new offense. But if you could get him for under 12, I'd be happy probably.
All right. I think it's something that you're going to have to watch preseason, how they use him a little bit. Not that they're going to give too much away. Yeah. But I just don't know how much value you'll get because of the name and because of the system.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I worry about. Anyways, speaking of value and systems, I don't know. I'm just trying to segue something slim. Let's take a look at the Washington Redskins. They add Andre Roberts this year out of Arizona, okay, but the big name is Deshaun Jackson from the aforementioned Philadelphia Eagles. I think I used that word properly, or that phrase, or whatever it was.
Sure.
Phys ed teacher, hey? Anyways, Slim, what do you think about Djax with the Skins and any love for Andre Roberts?
No, not really any love there, but I don't really have much love for Deshaun Jackson either, considering where he's being drafted right now. Kind of his average price that I've seen so far in auctions is roughly about $22, which puts him kind of as a mid, kind of wide receiver too. Um, I just have a hard time thinking he's going to live up to that price. I mean, to me, if he's getting drafted with the likes of Andre Johnson and Victor Cruz, I would take both of those guys over Deshaun Jackson. You know, last year he had some decent yardage, and you talked about it being a product of that offense, and I think that's what it came from. Because if you look, he was actually tied for 18th in terms of receptions with something like 80 or what was it, 82. But he did have 1,300 yards. I just can't see him coming close to matching those numbers again, going to a totally different team. It's a totally different system. I think he's going to catch probably somewhere around 60 passes this year. And that's not the production I want from a $22 wide receiver. Right. He had 9 touchdowns last year. He hadn't done that since 2009. And then he had 6, 4, 2. I mean, right. He has trouble finding the end zone. He has trouble staying on the field for all 16 games. So if I think his production is going to dip, I just have a hard time spending that kind of money. He's a guy that I'm going to throw out early in a draft and hope that people bid him up and are kind of looking at the numbers that he had last year and maybe not paying as close of attention to where he goes. I mean, what's he going to do? Overtake Pierre Garçon? As far as the wide receiver one in that team, there's no way. I don't think he's got chemistry with RG3 already. He's a target machine. I have a hard time seeing Garçon's target numbers and everything dipping that much with Deshaun Jackson being there. So if his numbers aren't going to change, are they going to throw it that much more in Washington to allow Deshaun to catch 80 passes again? I just can't see it. To me, 60 is more realistic. Maybe 70 at the max. But again, his yardage is going to take a huge hit too, just with the big plays. And I don't think they'll be looking as much vertically as they were with, say, Chip Kelly's offense. So that's a guy I'm avoiding right now.
Okay, so let's just do a quick name game, just that $22 value in a 12-man. Sure. Deshaun Jackson or Michael Crabtree. Don't look at your rankings.
I knew you were going to say that because I knew they were right beside each other. I'm going to take Crabtree because I think he's the best receiver on that team, and I don't think Deshaun Jackson necessarily is.
Okay, D-Jax or Andre Johnson?
I'll still go Andre just because, again, I think he's the best option they have no matter who's the quarterback.
Okay, how about D-Jax or Macklin?
I have a hard time that's really tight. Maybe D-Jax. I mean, okay. I just have a hard time trusting Macklin until I see what he's going to do in this system. He's never broken 1,000 yards yet, so
you do know that
I'm sure he'll do it this year.
You have Jackson at 20 and Macklin at 24, so just throwing that out.
Sorry?
You have Macklin at 24 right now, so you have D-Jax ahead of him. So just it's just interesting because, like you say, it's a big name, and some guys are going to love it, some guys are going to avoid it like the plague. So it's good.
Yep,
anyways,
for sure.
Hopefully it doesn't affect Pierre Garçon too much, right, Blister?
I hope not, because we want him to put up some big numbers again this year.
You betcha. ECL, watch out for us.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Blister, let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. Not a whole lot of stuff to talk about. Well, none of significance, as Slim would say, in the way of additions. Tony Gonzalez does get out of there finally, so that is a key loss. But anything of significance with the Falcons?
No, Tony's gone. He had 82 grabs last year, 147 yards, 8 touchdowns. Who's going to catch that? Don't instantly assume Levine Toilolo is going to be the man. Apparently, they don't look at him as that type of tight end, and he'll be turning into more of a blocking tight end. I just can't imagine, not having a tight end though that's going to catch some balls in Atlanta. Like, somebody has to be able to. So if it's not him, it'll be really interesting to see how things play out over the preseason here and stuff, because you can't. I don't think personally you can just have Julio and Roddy and not replace that productivity that you always got from Tony for the last few years. I think Julio should be healthy and Roddy as well, and they're both, I think unsigned for 2015, so they have to play for something as well. You look in the backfield, Steven Jackson got another year older. Obviously, we saw what happened last year. A lot of reports, avoid him if you can, let somebody else draft him, and for good reason. He broke down, didn't have that great of a season, probably was considered a bust by many. And you remember all the hype, Jaquiz Rogers was getting, he's this young spark plug, he's going to take over, got to get him.
Spark plug, I've heard that before.
He didn't do very much, and now they drafted another teeny little waterfly in Devontae Freeman, and honestly, he might get an opportunity. I get a little bit hesitant when, he's not another big back or anything. If you look at how much they hyped up Rodgers before the season, what the hell is the difference between him and Freeman right now? I mean, Freeman's a rookie. He hasn't played. He hasn't proven anything. Yes, he might be having a great opportunity, but so did Rodgers. So I liked this young Freeman. Don't get me wrong. I have a hard time imagining paying too much money for him in an auction or drafting him too high, because to me, these little guys they're good, like Gio and all these other guys. They're good for a while. They kind of remind me of a fly buzzing around that's hard to catch, but when you do catch them with the fly swatter, they're hurt bad. Yeah. So they're squished. And
to me,
you know what I mean? Like, I was looking at a lot of these ECL drafts. I was looking at a lot of the rookies, especially at running back, and I had a hard time, justifying grabbing them at this spot or that spot, because I just don't like 5'8" running backs or 5'7" or 5. I just think they just, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but
yeah, no, I kind of agree. But I do think that if you're going to take him, he's more of a dynasty guy than a redraft. I just think his value is going to be minimal this year, really. I'm not saying Steven Jackson's going to be a beast, but I mean, there's still Rodgers there and Jackson, and is Freeman going to get on the field enough to really make it worthwhile drafting him this year? I just have a hard time seeing it. Maybe in 2-3 years, he might get 50% of the touches then, but this year I have a hard time seeing him getting more than just a handful every game.
This offense, and I look at this offense right now. Options. Yeah, I agree with you, Slim. Like, when I look at this offense right now, I get scared because Julio is obviously potentially a stud, but he's got to stay healthy. Roddy White's not getting any younger. He was banged up a lot last year, and his body's not getting any younger. And then you look at they really don't have a proven tight end that can catch 82 balls like Tony. And then they got Steven Jackson, another old guy at running back. So, I mean, that some of these parts are going to probably wear down and break down again. And then if you look at the depth charts, there's not a lot of guys screaming, we can do it. We can carry the load here. I can take, 300 carries for a Freeman or a Rodgers. That's not going to happen. So, and they got I don't know. I just can't see the Falcons doing a whole lot more than they did last year. It's sad, but I just don't think they got.
How the mighty have fallen, eh?
Yeah.
Look at them and the Texans, and you're just like, it's Danger Bay, as they would say on the west coast of Canada. A couple people laughed at that. You laughed at that because all you had was CBC back in the day.
Country boy.
Speaking of Danger Bay, Slim, let's move on to Carolina. They really bolstered up that wide receiving core. Picked up Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant as wide receivers. Ed Dixon to solidify the tight end position. Slim, what is going on over there in Carolina?
Praying, maybe. I don't know. I think, I look at this team and I see kind of, as a Niners fan, kind of a Niners team from about 5 years ago, where they had a good defense and there were some young pieces there, but their offense, it was just full of question marks. Granted, they've got a better quarterback, but there's just no one really to get the ball to. And to me, I'm avoiding everything about this, at least until you kind of get a chance to see who's going to emerge. I mean, Kelvin Benjamin was drafted early. He's got bad hands. He's a rookie. I just have a hard time seeing him contributing tons. Definitely not consistent. I can't see Jericho Cotchery just stepping into this, if you want to call it wide receiver one on this team and flourishing.
We just talked about his.
I'd be shocked if he did what he did last
year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He just kind of rode some coattails a little bit in Pittsburgh last year, and now he's parlayed that into a little bit of money, and good for him. But I can't see it happening this year. So yeah, I think just the situation as a whole, it's an avoid at all costs, more or less, and even late in drafts. I just think there's going to be guys this year later in drafts at the wide receiver position that are going to have more upside and be sure bets than any of these guys on this team. So I'm not even going to draft them late in drafts, to be honest. So yeah, I'm avoiding it altogether.
There you go, and hurting Cam for sure, but we've talked about that before too. So moving on, Blitzer, let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints. The key addition there, I guess, wide receiver Robert Meacham from San Diego, your fabled franchise of the San Diego Chargers. What do you think about Meacham moving over to the Saints?
I think it's a waste of time, but you know what? I don't know why they bothered with him. They got some nice young talent there. Kenny Steele, Brandon Cooks this year, and hopefully our boy Brandon Coleman that we picked up in the 93rd round of the ECL draft. I hope he can develop into a player. Big guy, undrafted. But yeah, you know what? Meacham, I wouldn't even look at him at all in any kind of drafting format. Marcus Colston, however, is aging, 31 years. Last year was the worst year of his career, basically, as fantasy points per game. He played 15, but he had the lowest points per game, his lowest touchdown total in about 6-7 years. So I really do think Colston might be on the decline. He is a nice big receiver, but I think they have some young gunners there that, we know Drew Brees loves to throw the ball, and he's one of the best at it in the game. So you can't take that away from him, especially when you look at the stable of running backs that they have. But we'll stick to the receivers for a second. I'm hoping Kenny Stills has a bigger year this year. Second year. He had a nice year last year. Not great, but he had some flashes, some big games. He only had 32 grabs, so that went for 641 yards and 5 scores. I really hope that he can get that number 2 role, or if Colston does really fade out of the limelight, take over the number 1. That's the hope. Now, of course, everyone's all excited about Brandon Cooks, and I mean, for good reason. He's in a good situation, but again, rookie receivers, especially if you're in a redraft, don't go and spend huge money on this kid, because it's in a dynasty. I can see if you could spend more, no doubt about it. But I mean, look at how excited everyone was about Tavon Austin last year. Who he didn't do anything that helped your fantasy team win a championship last year, and I don't think Cooks will do that this year. He's got a great situation, but I just, it's like that shiny new toy you just got to have, and you give it to the kids at Christmas and end up playing with the friggin' box that it came in. It's so annoying. So Kenny Stills being that old box, it's not shiny new anymore. He's not old by any means, but I'm hoping he has the better year. Tight end Jimmy Graham, obviously he's a stud. If Gronk doesn't play, he will be the best tight end again for sure, no doubt about it. Or Thomas will give him a run. The only problem with Graham this year, he's squabbling about contract, this and that right now. I don't think I think that'll be on his mind a bit. Hopefully it'll be straightened out before the season starts. And then you get to the running backs. Pierre Thomas, Mark Ingram is playing for a contract. This will be the last year of his 5-year entry level or whatever. So if he's going to hope to keep playing in the league, he's going to have to do something. Kyrie Robinson is a name that you might remember from the playoffs last year. He's going to get a lot of attention. He might end up being the most expensive running back on their roster, and it'll be interesting to see if he does develop and get to a point where he'll help your fantasy team. It's interesting because, I mean, they've had Darren Sproles. They've had a bunch of backs. Chris Ivory used to be there, and so did Ingram and Thomas and these guys, and there hasn't been one running back in New Orleans that you would ever build a have as your anchor back or your lead back. You wouldn't even be able to get him as your RB2. Like, I wouldn't trust any of them in that regard. So running back situation in New Orleans is such that you might be better off letting somebody else spend their money on those backs, because until they have a lead back or close to it, a true number one, I don't think any of them are really guys that you can count on from week to week to help you win your week. It's too scary when they like to throw the ball and they got some good targets to throw them to.
Yeah, well, that's it. Hey, and I mean, I don't know, Meacham can't really bolster that wide receiver core. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, they could cut him before the year starts. Could.
So let's move on to Tampa Bay. They've got the new logo and the new look. They've brought in the new quarterback now. The old quarterback that'll be new to them, Josh McCown out of Chicago, put up some good numbers last year. So got to make himself some money that way. Is he going to take over the young version of the Red Rifle? Is he going to be the man?
Yeah, Red Rifle Senior.
Yeah, junior.
Yeah, no,
right?
I think
tall,
he's gonna,
but.
Yeah, well, he's older. He's 35. I think that qualifies.
Oh no, I'm talking about what's his head? Who's drawing a blank?
No, Glennon.
Yeah, Glennon. Yeah, the tall redhead.
Oh yeah, right. I thought you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, anyways,
the tall one. Yeah. Speaking of tall, yeah, I think they're building a basketball team in Tampa with these guys that they're getting with Mike Evans and Safarian Jenkins and bringing in these giants. But I think McCown will get the starting job, and I'm not super excited about a 35-year-old just getting tossed the keys to the offense and here you go. But I mean, he does have weapons there. I look at him as a really good streaming option because he can be had late in drafts. And last year when he got his chance, in 50% of the games he played, he was a top quarterback. He finishes a top 12 fantasy quarterback. So, I mean, and he had a little different offense in Chicago, but I mean, they've tried to build an offense that looks like in Tampa Bay that matches kind of what they had in Chicago. They've got big receivers and a big tight end, and I could see some similarities there. So, I mean, I think there'll be some success for McCown, and will it come week in and week out? I don't think so. I think that's why you're seeing his draftability, position reflecting that. Typically, he can be had for a couple bucks in an auction. So that's why I said I think like if you could couple him with somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, or if you even want to look later, maybe somebody like Alex Smith or Andy Dalton. Those are some guys that would be, I think a good streaming combo if you wanted to go that route this year. So. Like I said, the mock draft I just did, I got Roethlisberger and Cutler both for a total of $3. I was pretty happy with that as a streaming option. So, I think that there's a handful of guys down there, and if you want to go that route, I think McCown's definitely in play to be one of those guys that you should target for streaming.
Okay, good stuff. Blister, let's move on to you. Let's take a look at the Cardinals. Teddy Ginn Jr. comes in at the wide receiver position, and we also see Jonathan Dwyer as a running back. Any excitement there from the Cardinals free agent pickups?
No, not really. No, nothing.
Okay.
I don't like Ginn. I don't think Dwyer will be anybody of value. Maybe just a waiver wire ad at some point, depending on health. But out in Arizona, I mean, you still have Larry Fitz. He's a guy that's starting to maybe lose some value. You should see Michael Floyd continue to build on his last season, and I think, if you're, I don't know, I don't even remember what I have him ranked, but I mean, Michael Floyd's a guy that you're gonna, if you can grab him, he'll be a nice addition to your fantasy team. But I think the best bet on Arizona this year is Andre Ellington at running back. He looks to be getting they're saying right now he's going to get a lot of touches. I say that with a bit of skepticism because last year I drafted and paid a lot of money for C.J. Spiller because he wasn't going to get the ball till he puked. So I really hope that I already got Ellington on a team or two. I hope it's not the same scenario for me. But and I like Stefan Taylor as his number 2 and potentially a guy that could do some goal line work. So I think that situation doesn't look too bad to me. I would avoid tight ends in Arizona. That offense really doesn't feature the tight end at all to help your fantasy team. So, they just signed John Carlson this year. They got Hausler. Remember, Hausler was going to be a big deal.
Right. Oh yeah,
Plus,
I was excited. Drafted him.
they
Helped
even
me
got
out.
Jake Ballard there, and they got a rookie, Troy Nicholas. So unless they really change their offense over this off season, the tight end is a ghost in Arizona. So don't even look at them. Let somebody else spend their $1 or $2 on those guys. But yeah, nothing really. The additions they made, I can't see helping your fantasy team this year. So just look at Ellington, Taylor, Michael Floyd, Larry Fitz. That's about all you want to worry about. And again, Carson could be a late round, or more so, even a waiver wire bye-week fill-in quarterback.
Yeah. Slim, moving on to St. Louis. Take a look at the Rams. They pick up Kenny Britt from Tennessee. Any interest there in Britt at wide receiver?
Well, I'm somewhat interested. I want to see what happens in training camp here. I mean, there's been good reports right now. I think that if anyone can get anything out of him, it's Jeff Fisher. He did have his best season under the tutelage of Jeff Fisher before in Tennessee, but
right.
It wasn't great by any stretch. But I mean, it was his best season. And from all reports, he's healthy for the first time in a long time. I think he's fairly motivated. And he's in a situation where this team is starving for some kind of outside wide receiver option. And I'm not expecting him to catch 1,000 yards here or anything like that. But if I can get him for $1 with my last pick in a draft, I might take a flyer on him, and maybe he's serviceable for me as a during bye weeks or something like that. Or I don't know. I'm gonna pay attention and see what happens. He could very well end up being their second best receiving option on this team behind Tavon Austin this year, which to me I think makes him a serviceable fantasy option, at least on your bench. And maybe, like I said, use him in bye weeks or something like that, or as injury filler a week here or there. But I think he's maybe worth a look depending on how things go in training camp. But to me, this is something you got to pay attention to all summer and see just how it goes, because he's one of these guys, kind of like Blister was talking about with Meacham. He could very well end up being cut at some point. He's on a very low-risk contract, so it's no real penalty if the Rams decide to cut ties and just move on. So something to pay attention to, though.
Okay. Now, I was paying attention as I listed these teams, and I was just going in order of the way you had them in the draft kit, Slim. And I did have the Niners ahead of Seattle, but I chose to flip that so that you could speak to the Niners, even though I thought it might have been interesting, could have been more interesting to have Blister talk to it just to see what his take was on it. But I opted for the flip. So, Blister, we're going to go to you.
I saw what you did there.
Yeah. I didn't realize that you would actually realize. Okay. So, Blister, let's go to you. Yeah. Talking about the Seahawks, Blister, nothing significant really in the additions. They lose Golden Tate, which you spoke to, so talk to us about Seattle.
Seattle will be an interesting year, coming off the Super Bowl. And I think, obviously everyone's going to be gunning for them, and they got a heck of a tough division, so just getting out of their division each year is an accomplishment in itself, and I think it'll be pretty tough for them to do this year. They lost Golden Tate, who was a 30th ranked receiver last year. So the passing game in Seattle isn't the feature. There are rumors that they might try to change that a little bit this year and try to throw the ball a little bit more. But you know what? We'll see it if it happens. Why fix it if it isn't? If it's not broken. There's a lot of hype about Paul Richardson, the rookie. But again, you're looking. Again, we talk about a rookie. And here he is in an offense that doesn't even throw the ball a lot. I definitely would not waste any money on him, and I don't even know if I would in a dynasty unless things change and they start throwing the ball a lot. What good is he if your leading receiver is 30th when you're going to pay probably pretty decent money for this guy because in the dynasty. Potentially in our auction, I'd be surprised if he went, and if he did, if it was more than $1, I'd be shocked. And if he really contributed better than what Golden Tate did last year, then I'd be in total amazement. So Doug Baldwin, he was 41st last year as well, and he's back.
Doug Baldwin, he's still getting
waiting on Doug Baldwin.
We're still waiting on him, man.
Waiting on Doug Baldwin. That's a big inside joke with the ECL there. But Percy Harvin, he's there. He's been a big letdown for a little while now, too. He can't stay healthy, can't stay on the field. I guess the biggest concern probably for Marshawn Lynch owners or prospective owners is his body's had a lot of wear and tear, and he's not getting any younger, and he's got two pretty solid backs behind him in Turbin and probably even more so Christine Michael. So they're really talking about having a timeshare or running back by committee there this year, which could really hurt Marshawn Lynch's value. And I think he's one of those guys that, you would be paying pretty top dollar for in your auction, $45 to $55. And you probably have 7 or 8 running backs in that tier at least. So I would let somebody else maybe pay that money for him this year and get another guy from that tier that might be a little have a little better chance of getting the ball more, and maybe a younger guy like a Le'Veon Bell or a Stacy Monty Ball, Eddie Lacy, somebody like that. Because I just think that you probably aren't going to get if you spend $45-$50 or more on this guy, you're probably not going to get the bang for the buck this year. It's just all too often that these running backs, after they hit that magical age and they start getting up there by close to 30, he's at 28. He's at that age now where they start to see a decline in production. He's there, and it happens almost to every one of them. So don't go and throw the farm at him if that's going to be the case.
Okay. Well, don't throw the farm at him. That's
don't throw
old north of BMO. There you go. So finally, let's take a look at the San Francisco 49ers, Slim. I guess the major additions here, Stevie Johnson and Brandon Lloyd. So talk to us about free agent moves from your Niners.
Well, I don't think there's anything of real fantasy significance. We've kind of touched on it in podcasts past. I mean, Brandon Lloyd, I'm not even sure he's going to make the team. I would actually be kind of surprised if he does make the team. I think he's more or less trying out maybe for another team right now, trying to resurrect his career. And I just don't think Stevie Johnson's going to be much of anything as far as fantasy goes. I think he'll be a solid contributor in real football, but fantasy-wise, I'm avoiding him. I just think he's going to be hard-pressed to be on the field enough to consistently put up numbers like we might have been accustomed to a few years ago in Buffalo. Yes, he's coming off a down year. He was injured, but I think he's the 4th best receiver on this team right now behind Crabtree, Bolden, and Davis. And a team that likes to run the ball and doesn't typically use a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, I just don't see him being on the field tons. So, I'm going to avoid him, and I'll be shocked if Brandon Lloyd makes the team.
Okay. Well, that was short and sweet, actually, but we have spoke to it before, so I do appreciate the brevity there.
I could talk about the whole team, but I mean, we'll save it for another pod, probably.
Save it for some more. So that wraps up the NFC free agent moves and any significant impact that you may or may not have for your fantasy team. Make sure you're checking us out over at thefantasyfootballauction.com. We've got Slim updated his auction values but a couple of days ago. We've got player rankings on there. The boys have little comments as far as why they have their dollar values set for each of those individual players. You can also check out the draft kit like we talked about before. $6.95, free updates all summer long. If you like what you're hearing or you don't like what you're hearing, leave us a comment on iTunes. If you want this automatically updated to your device, your smartphone, then click subscribe there in iTunes, and every time we update, your device will be automatically updated. That's about all I got, boys. I'll throw it to you. I know you don't have anything left because you hate when I say that, so you guys are good.
I can tell you I can tell you a story about futility real quick.
Oh yes.
So I play a bit of daily baseball here, and I quickly threw one lineup in today. 10 guys, one starting pitcher, one relief pitcher. I got one hit out of the whole friggin' lot of these losers. One hit. Edward Encarnacion, Toronto, 0 for 4. Howie Kendrick, 0 for 3. Josh Donaldson, 0 for 3. Owings Montero, they're a bit of a stab. Bautista, 1 for 4. Nelson Cruz, 0 for 2. What the hell?
So the question
That could be the
everyone's dying
lowest
to know,
total I've
though,
ever
is
had.
did you win?
I'm not even close. And the other guy's
Gonna say,
got a
come on.
okay score, but I've been double. Normally, what he has, I would have twice that much on a normal night, or at least 1.5 times that much, and I got 5 points. Like, I think Maddie and Marley could have got 5 points in easily. Oh well.
Could have
that
drew
was
a
only
couple
$2.
walks or something.
It's terrible. That's an embarrassment. Ever since Doug pumped me up as being one of the highest percentage of winners about 3 weeks ago, I think I probably quickly turned that around into one of the lowest percentage of winners. So it's amazing how when you say, "Hey man, you're golfing really good out there, keep it up," and then the next thing you know, it's double, triple. Clubs are snapped, and that's the way this is going right now. Awful.
Well, there you go. Exercise and futility, Blister today, daily fantasy baseball. But do find him all the time on Fantasy Sports for You. You can head over to the website, click on the banner, find out the deals. You get the free match on your first deposit, fantasysportsforyou.com. But run that through our website so you can utilize the referral code auction and get that free match. So, but we'll talk a lot more about fantasy sports for you as we move closer to the football season because there's potential for some new things brewing that way. Anyways, Slim, good luck getting ready for the start of exams here and your transition into Fort High. Blister, let's keep the anger level down tomorrow. I'm trying to get some work done. And
I'll be okay.
And well, I thought you were gonna say a story about redundancy, but not futility. I didn't know which way you were going there.
What are you sharing an office now or what?
Well, no, but
he always shuts his door so I can't come in his office.
It doesn't stop him from coming in, but anyways, I got an exit plan and I got a lot of work to do, Blister. Just leave me alone. Anyways, for the rest of you, we'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.